last time, Snooty Dad tried to review Shining Soul for the Game Boy Advance, but he made the idiotic decision of choosing the one fictional magician who is more inept than this one. So he tried again with the Red Dragon, with a badly exaggerated Welsh accent, who misses with his ball more times than the England national football team. Intrepid, indomitable, and incompetent, he set out to battle against a motley collection of the usual Shining Force suspects, only to be rewarded with a mediocre ending. He concluded that the game was rubbish, and alluded to the fact that it had a sequel. And now, the review of said sequel. And this is a somewhat rushed review of Shining Soul for the Game Boy Advance, the Phantom Menace of the Shining series. Actually, I'd rather watch the Phantom Menace than play that game again, but I did mention that the sequel is actually pretty good, so let's have a look at it now. This time you have twice the number of player characters to choose from, including a ninja, a cantle healer, a dark magician, and a werewolf. But for the sake of my playthrough, I picked the warrior and named him after the protagonist of another popular action RPG franchise. The game starts with a prologue, carrying on the shining tradition of girls reading books. It's a pretty well done scene. When the game starts, you meet the backpacker from the previous game, who this time reveals himself to be... oh, it's Boken from the original Shining Force. Then you get attacked by a slime, giving you a chance to try out the combat. When you win, you get a level up. This circumvents a lot of the frustration I had with the magician in the first game, since you now get a skill point right off the bat. Once again, you have skill points and stat points that you have to assign manually, so you have to think carefully about how you want to grow. A small increase to everything at once, or a larger boost to a single stat. You could say it's a bit like Trials of Mana, where you decide how you want your character to grow, and you can develop different character builds. Once again, you've got skill points that you can assign, giving you more powerful special attacks with each weapon, or increase the effectiveness of items, armour, and so on. This time around, the developers put a lot more effort into the stage design. They feel more like actual locations rather than just random stage assets thrown together willy-nilly. For example, the Goblin Fortress actually feels like you're sneaking around an enemy base camp. In addition, there's secret passages and hidden areas all over the place, leading to more treasures. Maybe the simple overhead angle is easier to work with than the isometric view from before. There's usually a point in the levels where you're encouraged to wait while the enemies are talking. Like, in the Goblin Fort, you can wait for them to reveal the location of a set of keys that will come in handy for an objective later in the game. There's also this one in the Fairy Spring stage. The hobbits are talking about the treasures that they stole from the castle. And before you ask, no, they did not take any rings. Please stop asking the hobbits that. You can wait for them to expose the treasure you want. Like here, I went after this umbrella, because an NPC back in town mentioned losing an umbrella, and it turns out it's a really valuable one. Maybe she bought it off the Penguin from the 60s Batman series. No wonder it's so expensive, it's a piece of film history! That's another improvement. For running around and talking to people, I found out that yes, side quests are indeed a thing. The first one I came across was getting rid of the slimes coming out of a well in this old woman's back garden. My reward for doing so was a soul, and I'm not talking about a piece of paper with Bart Simpson's soul written on it. These are summons that build up energy when you attack enemies, and when your soul meter is full, you can press the select button for a screen-clearing special attack.
I summon Bullshock Dragon! Let's go! Okay, Bullshock Dragon! Break his shield! Final attack!
Combat in general is similar to the previous game, but here they didn't get carried away with the respawning enemies. You actually get a halcyon period where you beat all the enemies on screen. The boss fights are pretty good too. You have to find openings, usually where they've made a mistake, and you can get in a few hits without risk of taking damage yourself. The boss of the Fairy Spring is... oh my god, it's Chaos from Sonic Adventure! However, you still can't pause the game. Even when you bring up the menu, enemies are still moving around and will sucker punch you while you can't defend yourself. Now, I understand why they did this. It's focused on multiplayer, so they just assumed that everyone who plays the game would do so with a party of friends. This time, when you die, you're woken up by the innkeeper's daughter. This is Angela. She has a cute face, which is good since you're going to be seeing her face a lot. Though it does make a nice change from having this brony shouting at you all the time. The graphics were another improvement. More characters have avatars, and there's new artwork for the shopkeepers, such as Stella, the item appraiser, who returns from the previous game. Wow, I never noticed how buxom she was before. So there's a lot to like in this game compared to its precursor. But what about the negatives? Well, as I said earlier, the game isn't exactly easy. You will die a lot. The most annoying part of dying is that you drop half your gold. Common for games in the Shining series, but you also drop items that you were equipped with. That makes absolutely no sense! So it's actually possible to permanently lose your best armour. Saving is pretty awkward too. It's one of those games where the only option is to save and quit. There's no option to just save and continue. There's also a crafting system carried over from the first game, except here, the blacksmith is not a desperate 40-year-old virgin with a wife wanted sign. Seriously, their blacksmith had a wife wanted sign. That's all I'm going to say about it. Some enemies drop types of ore like mithril or dark ore. When you have 3 pieces of material, you can give them to the blacksmith along with some money for a random piece of equipment. Now apparently the more money you give, the higher your chances of getting good items is. So I gave the blacksmith 2,000 gold to get woolen gloves. You complete bastard! How do you get wool from metal? I'm sure this blacksmith is related to Del Boy. And some of the text in the game can be really slow-paced. They didn't get as carried away with the amount of dialogue as, say, the Legend of Heroes franchise, but the text before and after the boss battles crawls across the screen so slowly that paint would literally dry in the time it takes you to get on with the plot.
Oh, we've got a plot this year, have we?
Very much so, Eddie. Yes, unlike the last game, Shining Soul 2 actually has a story. Your character is an adventurer who's arrived at the kingdom to take part in the fighting tournament, but your fight against the reigning champion is interrupted by an urgent news bulletin. Goblins are up to no good and the princess is missing. Since your opponent, Sir Deathheart, is the Grand Champion Knight of the Kingdom, he's sent off to investigate. However, before he leaves, he suggests that the kingdom needs you to help as well. Yes, it starts off as a typical rescue the princess story, but there's a lot more to it than that. Do you remember that set of keys you found in the Goblin Fort? Well, keep hold of them because a couple of stages later, you'll find the princess and use the keys to unlock her cell. By the way, the regent of Hyrule called, she wants her fashion sense back.
Well, excuse me, princess!
She also seems to be perfectly fine with walking home by herself. Don't let any of the bosses I missed kidnap you again on the way out! Then you confront the wicked sorceress Wizari, who likes hanging paintings of herself like some kind of East European dictator. Someone seems to have a very high opinion of herself, or maybe just a low opinion of the rest of the world. In this battle, all the enemies are invincible. It took me a minute to figure out that you're supposed to destroy the portrait first. Now again, the developers were actually being clever with this boss fight. Funnily enough, after this the plot changes from rescuing the princess to just trying to get something to eat. The king's trying to prepare a banquet for you, but there's one problem after another for you to solve. How much longer are you going to delay this banquet? I can't go fighting evil on an empty stomach, you know. It soon turns into a save the world plot as you find out that a group of Chaos Knights are planning a bit of world domination. In one of the final stages, you run to, I don't know, this guy? I don't really remember him, but he seems to know me for some reason. Oh, now I remember, he's our alchemist from the opening intro. Sorry, I actually skipped that scene so I didn't recognise him at first. This is one failing of the story. It's been so long since I've actually seen this guy that I forgot he even existed. You fight him twice in this stage, which makes me think they could have had you meet him in an earlier stage and played up the rivalry a bit more. Though it is interesting to fight a boss that's the same size as you for a change. It sort of reminds me of fighting rival characters in an East game. I picked a good name for my swordsman, didn't I? Then at long last, you find Sir Deathheart, who's gone through a bit of a growth spurt since you last met. He reveals that he was tempted by the alchemist to succumb to the dark side, and is now the leader of the Order of Chaos Knights. Was that spoiler warning? Does this really need a spoiler? He's shown being tempted by the baddie right in the opening sequence. His name is Deathheart, for goodness sake! You beat him, but he still doesn't want to go down. He still has love that he wants to teach you. You barely know each other, but you can't help but feel a wave of nostalgic sentiment. So now that Deathheart has had his Darth Vader-style deathbed redemption, we can report back to King Marcel and close the book on Shining Soul 2. Except that the true final bosses decide to make an appearance. Chaos, not to be confused with the one we fought earlier, has kidnapped the royal family and is holding them in a dimension of darkness. I head in for the true final battle, with Angela apparently tagging along this time. So you fight the super tough end boss, after which... Okay, this actually is a really big spoiler, so if you want to skip it, I'll mark the spoiler danger zones in the description below. After which, you seem to be stuck in the void, but a gentle voice calls out to you and guides you back home.
I have carried you many times, again and again. Don't you remember? You were hurt many, many times. And each time, you became stronger. I know this well. I've always watched over you. I am your guardian angel. I call myself Angela in your presence. King Marcel, Queen Yvonne, Princess Camille, they are all safe. They're all waiting for you. We are almost there. The same familiar place.
And when you've been guided back home, the game ends with the residents of Plantor gathering together for a commemorative photograph. Oh, hold on, I wasn't ready yet! Overall, this game takes the format of the first Shining Soul and improves it in every possible way. The difficulty is better balanced, gaining levels is less tedious, NPCs actually have character, and while the story isn't exactly Charles Dickens, it does actually have a plot with a satisfying ending. So my final rating for this game is a skin of its teeth 7 out of 10. While it's not quite as good as, say, Secret of Mana, it still has all the bare necessities of a good action RPG. There's plenty of replay value thanks to the different classes you can play as, including a ninth character who's unlocked after you beat the game. So now it is truly time to close the book on Shining Soul 2. But first, time for that banquet! I'm so hungry I could eat a bloody Octorok! I do love a bit of calamari. Thank you for watching. Special thanks to my friend Emma for doing Angela's voiceover. If you like the sound of her voice, I've linked to her channel in the description below where she does song covers. Thanks again for watching, and cheerio!